So to create a null, I'll just come up to Layer, New, Null Object. I'll just rename this Cam Control, and I'll make sure that's a 3D layer. Then I'll take our camera, and I'll parent that to our control object. I'll come back to the beginning of our comp here. I'll press R on the keyboard to bring up our rotation. I'll set a keyframe on the Y rotation. I'll set this to 45 degrees. I'll hop ahead here all the way to the end of our composition, and I'll set this to minus 45 degrees, so that we've got a 90-degree rotation. I can just hide this here so we don't see it in the viewport. And now if I press play, you can see that our layers are a little more staggered and have that little bit of separation in Z-space to create a more interesting look. And if you want to get a little more distance to sell this effect even more, you just have to arrange the final resting position of all your layers so that they're separated a little further apart. The very last thing we want to do is we just want to add a little depth of field to our camera, so that elements in the foreground, like our text layer, are in focus, and everything behind it begins to fade out. So twirl down this arrow, come into our camera options here, I'll turn our depth of field on. Now nothing really happened, that's because our aperture is too low. So we're just going to crank that up to something like 800. And so you can see now that some of the elements in the center here are in focus, and everything else is out of focus. Now if we come back into our top view, you can see that if I begin to move our focus distance, you can see where our camera is focused. So if I come to somewhere in the middle of the composition, where pretty much our graphic is flat on, I can adjust our focus distance so that our front layers, the text layers, are in focus, represented by this white line, and everything else behind it begins to fade out. So now if I come back into our straight view, you can see that our text is in focus, and we get back to this outer ring, and that's a little bit blurry. If we want that effect more pronounced, we just have to increase our aperture to something like 1000. You can see that effect's even more pronounced. So now if I play through, you can see the elements pass through the focus of the camera. They start out of focus, come into focus, and then go back out of focus until our front text layer lands. What's great is you can even keyframe the focus distance if you want to do a rack focus on your own.